Hello, everybody. Welcome to Yerushalmi Megillah Daf Lamed Zayin. We're at the first two dots. It says Ein Oisin Mamad Moshe. The Gemara is wondering what's Mamad Moshe. So the Gemara, it's Imdu Yikarim Shvu Yikarim Shiva Pamin. They would do this thing where the Avelim would as they're going back from the basic forest, they would have the kroivim that were not avelim, kroivim the base that were not avelim. They would sit them down, they would stand up, sit down, stand up. So and they do this 7 times, and less than a minyan. You didn't do this because it wasn't covered to say yikarim to less than a minyan. Einam Rebichas Vein V'Chasanim, we said that was another clause in the Mishnah. Tani, I'm Rebichas Chasanim called Shiva. The 7 days we say Rebichas Chasanim, like we do today, Sheva Brachas. Rabbi Yirmiyah Saba Meima, Mafkin Kalsa called Shiva, that we put the Kal under the Chuppah all 7 days. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Vatani Rabbi Chia, I'm Rebichas Avelim called Shiva. If you Rabbi Chia learned that you say Bechzveim Kol Shiva. No, it's by the Shiva. So they say every single day to say Bechzveim. It's Chomeim Mafke Mesa Kol Shiva. You're gonna tell me they're gonna pull the mace out of the cave and rebury him 7 times every day? So obviously not. So also you don't bring out the kal. You just make the brachas like we do today with the Sheva brachas. My kidduin. So when do we talk? Say this the the Birchs Avelim. Ma kam sameich imoy, af kam anachim imoy. It's a parallel, interestingly enough, it's a parallel to Chasana. So the same way there's Sameach for 7 days, there's Loilenu, there's Menachem double for 7 days, Ma kam askirin, af kam askirin. That's it, you make like the same way by Shebrach, you maskir the shvachas of the chasen, you also maskir your maspid the mace. It's time to available oil in it's time to available oil in. So two brises. One brise says that the availum are not part of the minion, and then another brise says that the availum are from the minion. Now the Gemara is going to try to resolve and say maybe these two brises are not arguing each other. Am Rav Avuna, man min availum oil min a minion, beveloi oisei ames. We're talking about where the Avelim not part of the minion. That's when it's of that mace. So in other words, the mace that they're being maspid, so they're not Olam in a minion. Why? Because the Avelim, there's a bracha for the Avelim too. If they're part of the minion, you don't have 10 people to partake in the bracha, since the Avelim are the receiving end of the bracha. Mandam Avelim Olam in a minion, but Avelim Mesach, in other words, the Avelim, they lost a different mace. They happen to be by this mace, this other mace. So the Gemara says, how can you tell me that? Avel is not allowed to leave his house only to be mekabel tanchumim. He can't give tanchumim. He has to stay home. He can't do any of that. So therefore, there's no way around this. The two brises are indeed size each other. Tani Shmuel and Kiddush HaChodesh El Basara. Kiddush HaChodesh takes place with Asara. And a minion. Rabbi Yosef B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan Emakan Eida. It says Eida. We'll go with the pasuk of the carbon Eida. Deborah al Bnei al Adas Bnei Yisrael. Ramat Aleim Kedoshim Tiyuki Kodesh Niyashem Lekeichem. So it says Adas Bnei Yisrael. Lahalon ad Moshe Leider Razos in this week's Parsha. If you're in Chutzlarts, in Shlach it says ad Moshe Leid. Nothing is coincidental. So we have this Gemara for this week's Parsha, right? Ad Moshe Leider Razos. Ma Eda Mur Lahal Nasara. Just like by the Meraglim, it was Basara. You're right to take out Yeshua and Kalev. They weren't part of them. They were not part of this. The wicked Eda. Afkan Nasara also it's 10. Amrav Simon. Nemakan Toich. It says over here Toich, so the Toich is Los Chaloshem Kochi V'Nikdashti B'Soich B'nei Yisrael, and it says it by the B'nei Yaakov V'Yavo B'nei Yisrael Lishba B'Soich Habon when they got to when the Shvatim were going to Egypt. So it says over there, so now the Gemara is going to amend this in a minute, but just like by the Shvatim there were 10, so to here also by when you get to a Davar Kedusha, which Kiddush HaChodesh is, you need 10 people. It says B'toich Haboim. B'toich Haboim is a lot more right? That they were 10. No, the Shvatim were 10 amongst all the people coming to Egypt, but there were hundreds of thousands of people coming to Egypt. Elonoima kam b'nei Yisrael v'nem l'ham b'nei Yisrael. So the focus isn't on the B'toich, it's on the B'nei Yisrael. It says B'nei Yisrael when they went down to Egypt, and it says over here B'nei Yisrael, Rabbi Nikdashti b'sar B'nei Yisrael. So it's not the word B'toich, we're focused on the word B'nei Yisrael. Malon Asar Rav Kanas, or just like over there it's 10, the B'nei Yisrael were 10, as the Shvatim that went down to Egypt, so to over here it's 10. If you're looking at that entire parsha, you'll see it says 10 times the word Kahanim. V'yu kulum koyanim. So if that's the case, why are you saying it's 9 plus a koyin? Why don't you say they should all be koyanim? So Zaktima riboy achar riboy is lamait, which is actually the opposite of what it says. And there's some that correct the gears and say in mit achamit el rabbis. In other words, that there means the same thing. It's just the way the lashon is printed over here. So it should go backwards. So some farshim corrected that mit achamit ein el rabbis. In other words, it keeps saying again koyin koyin koyin. So keeping memait everybody else. So what's it memait? So if I have mit achamit el rabbis, it's marba yidden and marba regular Yisraelim, and a koyin you have to have a koyin view. So if that's the case, if you marry anybody, you call Israel, let them all be Israelim. It says Kehanim that it's got to serve a purpose. The purpose to say they need at least one kohen. At Kedoin b'makdish gufa shel sadeh. All right, so that's why I go on a makdish, my field, to hektish. Okay, so what about dmei sodei olai? So what do we say? You need 10 in the Mishnah. That's where you makdish your field. And now you want to be part of your field. So you need 10 people to come and give an estimate of what the field is worth. What about if he says, Demei Sodai Olai? So he's not makdish to field directly. He's only makdish to cash value. So what over there, do you need 10? Maybe because it's based off a field, or maybe it's 3 because it's moment. So Nashmina Ada. Erichim hametaltalim b'shloisha. Erich metaltalim b'shloisha with 3 people. V'yesh erichim she'en metaltalim. Is there any erich that's not metaltal? So the Gemara's understanding at this point is since every erich involves cash, so it's all metaltalim. Rabbi Yaakov Barach Hashem bar Abba b'shem Rab Chanina. Oima harei erki olai uvo l'sadre min hakarka shaman loy ba'asara. So he says the way it works is like this. If I say erki olai, so then then and I want to pay. I don't have the money now, so I'm saying just go get my field. So then taka shalom b'asara. If I'm going to give the cash value or the metaltalin, then shalom b'shloisha. So we see from here it depends. So the Gemara, oima rei erki olai einai ka'oima demei soda elai. Actually, so the Gemara says no. Tama erki olai is not as if he said demei soda elai, even though we're massigim those we go and there's a set value for each person based on his age. However, if let's say he can only afford to pay a certain amount, so we're going to estimate how much we think he can afford to pay. So, but what the Gemara says, actually, there's a fundamental difference between someone who says Erkilai and Meisadei. What's the difference? The difference is that when you say Erkilai, it's a set amount. We know what the amount is. The question is what you can afford to pay. When a person says the Meisadei, we have no idea what the value of the sada is. We don't know even the amount. And that's the fundamental difference. And therefore, When he says the May Sade Alai, maybe that you would not say, well, look at it like metaltalin because he's saying cash, he's pledging cash. No, say then we have to figure out what the value of the field is. Once we have to do that, then maybe it's only basara. Avalimama re'alai meyomona lehektish shameloi bishloisha and like a sheyasha nida mesigyat. So if you want to compare it to any case, if you want to compare a case of non-erichin to erichin, it will be a case where the guy pledges and he says, listen, he says, I'm pledging $100 to Hagdish. Now, maybe he doesn't have the $100 right now. I'll get it eventually. Maybe it doesn't right now. So we're going to go down and we're going to have to estimate what do we think he does have. That would be bishloisha. That would be done bishloisha. Right, Reb Chaim Kanievsky goes on to say that Enechanami, if we're going to estimate, right, even if we, in a case of, he says, "Harei laimemon lehektish," if we're going to go collect this money from a field, it would have to require a sarah. Okay, Zok the Gemara, Tani avodim mishvachas metaltalin, actually avodim ushtaris. I'm sorry, we're going to note that girsa. Tani avodim ushtaris metaltalin, ein lahem igeres bikoris. There's no igeres bikoris, right? Gemara. Maui Geras Bikaris. Well, what's it Geras Bikaris? Avida Bapas Yama Achroza. When we call out, we announce. We know Bezdin before they have a sale, they would go out and announce, we're selling this field. I think it was 30 days. There was a 30-day period. They would go out and announce that's on the field. This way people would hear about it and they would come and they would raise as much money as possible. Ula b'Rebbe Shmuel Amar, avodim. Why by avodim shlo yivrechu? So there's no I guess because by avodim we don't want to run away. And shtosim l'tatalon shlo yignovu. They might somehow they tend to disappear. Either people coming to the auction, if they have, they may end up stealing. These things may disappear, and that'll be the end of it. We're not going to get any money. Does this not tell us that avodim are nifta bishloisha? Why is that? Because Reb Chaim Kanievsky says, because the guy, right, you don't want to be mefarsim that you're selling an evi, you may run away. So if you do it quietly, do it quietly. If you do it basaru, that's not quietly. Do it b'shloish, it's quiet. Amalei, said, yeah. Amalei v'ataninu v'kakois tisha v'koyin v'adam kiyotzeben. Didn't we learn in the Mishnah it says adam kiyotzeben? So he's thinking Adam meaning a slave, or who else would be sold? Amalei said, no, you don't understand the Mishnah. Adam da'acha ben chayrin hu. We're talking about an Adam ben chayrin. And he's so we're talking about a guy who said Dameolai to Hagdish, and now we have to figure out how much he will be sold for on the market so he can fulfill his pledge to Hagdish. So to do that, we're attacking Mefarsim with 10 people, but Stam and Evid, we're not Mefarsim. Also, the Rabbi, now this actually is a Gemara from different sugya. This comes from Ksubis, and we're talking about over there where the Dayanim gave an estimate to the value of something, and they were off by Yishtus. And there's machlokes over there what the halacha is, because we know regularly if it's off by Yishtus, depending on exactly how much there's a no, and it's off by a certain amount called Yishtus, it's more than Yishtus to make a chizbatel. If it's less than Yishtus, right? So then you just it's I think it's bottle, and if it's exactly a shtus, you can the guy has a choice of what to do. So over there, what happens if Bezdin is off by a shtus? So he wanted to pass like the Rabbanan where it's bottle, but the mekach is bottle over there. Amalei Reloza ben Parta, ben Benai Reloza ben Parta, Rabbi lekach limadateni, shebeshem zikenecha. And here we have to change the gifts again. In Kema, Koich Bezin Yafa. We know there's a rule over that Koich Bezin Yafa. Bezin is not a regular entity, like a regular person. Bezin has, right, we know there's Hefke Bezin Hefke. Bezin a certain power that were given to them by the Chachamim. So if we're going to say that they're just like any Joe, and if they're off by Shtus, it's all batal. So then, why is Bezin? Where's Bezin? Bezin Yafa? Because the Beit Takav Avik Reb Shimon Gamliel, and he said that that it's not batal, that it's kayim, based on Rebbe Elazar ben Parta's objection. Okay, everybody, good tavach.